All right, let's get it. Drive time Wednesday afternoon, 2:20. Sean and I had a aggressively long crosstalk today, Wednesday afternoon style. About 72 degrees and sunny. It's a gorgeous day. Beautiful Wednesday afternoon. And as it is every day, it's so good to have you with us. You're halfway through that work week. You are one day closer to the weekend. And we got a lot to do on the show today. Game 4, NBA Finals, Madison Square Garden, better known as the world's most famous arena. Between the Spurs and the Knicks tonight, 6:30 Mountain Time is the tip. Little pregame coverage at 6 o'clock for you. Don't forget, of course, you can hear that game here on our radio station. Can the New York Knicks take that commanding 3-1 lead? Can the upstart young San Antonio Spurs deadlock this thing at 2 games apiece? New York is a slight favorite. Donald Trump will not be at the game tonight, so a little bit of a more normal atmosphere for Knicks fans to enjoy. So we'll see. Should be a good one. It's been a fun first 3 games. 3 games decided by only 15 points. San Antonio is led by 8 or more at the end of every first quarter. And the games have been within 1 possession in the final 2 minutes, all 3 games. So it's been tight. It has been close. We will see what happens tonight. Really entertaining game last night in the battle for Lord Stanley's Cup. The Carolina Hurricanes knocked that thing up at 2 games apiece with a 5-3 win. As they head back home now, see who is able to hoist that cup when the dust has settled. We have mandatory mini camps throughout the course of the NFL as we're inching closer and closer to leaning into some more football talk. And it is the eve of the biggest sporting event in the world. The World Cup begins tomorrow. The U.S. men's national team will start their foray into World Cup play Friday night at 7 o'clock. Fox has the coverage for you guys, and USA Paraguay will be the first game. Next week it's Australia, then it's Turkey the week after that. So we'll see if the U.S. can get out of the group and hopefully advance and do something special and exciting. A lot to do on the show. Neil Smith, our buddy, to talk some hockey right out of the gates. General manager for the New York Rangers. When they won the Stanley Cup in 1994, he'll break down the Stanley Cup Finals. We'll do a little Mammoth as well. Then we're going to bring in Tim McMahon, Band McMahon, our guy, to talk some NBA Finals and some Jazz basketball on the show on a Wednesday. My buddy Easton Folster, the executive director of the Utah Golf Association, and somehow, some way, longtime Knick fan, even though he's a local guy. We're going to bring in Easton today. He's been pining to get on the show ever since the Knicks went on this run. So we'll do a little golf, and we'll see how it's been for Easton to experience this Knick run. And then Sam Bruckhouse later on from Sumer Sports. We'll do some college and pro football with Sam on a Wednesday afternoon. Neil Smith, Tim McMahon, Easton Folster, Sam Bruckhouse. All of you, the great listeners, thank you so much for making us a part of your day today and every day. Me, Spence Checketts, and that guy, Porter Larson. We are 4 hours away, buddy. 4 hours away. This is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want to go back to San Antonio having lost both games on your home court, pal. Just so you know, that's my analysis of the thing.
It's astute analysis as well. That is very much the case. Obviously, you get the cushion when you go up 2-0 on the road, but if you come back home and just piss that away, well, not ideal. So for the Knicks, yeah, it's clearly, I don't know, the most important game in franchise not history, but I don't
pretty
know.
Close.
You go back to 1973 to have a game more important for the Knicks than this one, because I don't believe they ever held a lead in the actually they did against the Rockets, right?
3-2.
Yeah.
Up 3-2 going back to Houston.
That was probably the most important game.
Hakeem Olajuwon's fingernail caught John Stark's three-point attempt.
That's right.
To send that thing to a Game 7, and John was on fire that game. Olajuwon doesn't block that shot. It's going in. We win. But to your point, tonight's a massive game.
Yeah. And I'm cautiously optimistic, as I have been throughout the series. I think it's the deeper team. They're obviously at home. That one guy is just such an X factor on number one, how long he's able to stay on the floor, foul trouble, all of the above. That's really the story of this series and of this game, which I'll be honest with you, Spence, may decide this series.
Yeah, it might. It could. Either the Knicks up 3-1 or it's deadlocked at 2. It's only the second time in history. The first 3 games of the finals have been won by the road team. If San Antonio wins tonight, that will be historic. That has never happened before. Road team winning the first four games of the NBA Finals. All right, we'll do some hockey with Neil Smith, some Stanley Cup Final with Neil coming up in just a little bit. But on a Wednesday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Stores, it's time now for your opening tip. Now, like any good coach, it's time to update the game plan for a healthy green lawn. Now that the weather is hot, it's time for IFA Spring and Summer Lawn Food for healthy turf that stays green all summer. IFA Spring and Summer Lawn Food, it's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA.coop or at a local Utah store today. Game 4, Knicks Spurs tonight at 6:30 Mountain Time. Television is on ABC. The radio coverage is here as your ESPN affiliate in the market. We are the home of the NBA Finals. The New York Knicks are a slight favorite to win this game tonight. Ultimately, it's been a very interesting series where all 3 games have been very, very close. Of course, Game 1, the Knicks were down 14. An 11-0 run to end the game was able to allow the Knicks to get that win. Game 2, the Knicks were winning pretty big in the second half, and a big-time comeback from San Antonio was thwarted by a really bad turnover from Victor Wembanyama when he threw it off Stephon Castle's back. Wemby missed the game winner. Knicks survived there. And then Game 3, at MSG, Victor Wembanyama became the second youngest player in NBA history to have a 30-point, 5-rebound, 5-assist games in the NBA Finals. That broke the Knicks' 13-game winning streak. New York has not lost back-to-back games at the Garden since February. This has been a series of adjustments, but after 2-3 games, and Mitch Johnson was asked about this today, the other team knows the deal. There's not a lot of things you can do. I mean, it's basketball at the end of the day. San Antonio did make some adjustments for Game 3, namely playing Jalen Brunson mostly straight up, not doubling Jalen a lot. They did send some late doubles on Jalen, but they just basically said, okay, Stephon Castle, this is your job to guard him straight up. And the fact of the matter is, Jalen Brunson has not had a great series. He's had a very inefficient series. We talked about this with Howard Beck yesterday. And what San Antonio actually elected to do was run their extra defender out on Karl Anthony Towns. And that not only affected his ability to get shots, he only shot 10 times and scored 11 points, but for the second time all postseason long, he only had 1 assist. They took away his passing lanes. That's the adjustment San Antonio made. And by the way, we've talked about this cat narrative a little bit, how so many people around pro basketball have always been a little bit critical of Karl Anthony Towns for not being able to get it done in the most important moments. He's been better throughout the course of the playoff run, and he's actually rebounded well in the first couple of games. He guarded Wembanyama really well. But in the fourth quarter of the NBA Finals, 0 points and only 6 shots. He was 0 for 1 in Game 1, 0 for 1 in Game 2, and 0 for 4 in Game 3. They simply need more from him, as he has been kind of this revelation as your pivot playmaker from the top of the key to take some pressure off of Jalen Brunson. And Jalen needs some pressure taken off of him. But what San Antonio did in Game 3 was really, really smart. They elected to utilize an extra defender, to throw that extra defender at Cat to take away his passing lanes and therefore basically eliminate him as a playmaker, which has been kind of the biggest storyline of this Knick team all season long. Only 1 assist for Karl Anthony Towns, 4 of 10 from the floor. Mikal Bridges, a complete no-show. They need more from him, 1 of 5. During Game 3, only scored 2 points, and Jalen did score 32, but 25 shots to get that. He had 5 turnovers, and they didn't double him. They basically said, we're going to kind of let you do your thing, because we need to make sure those other players don't beat us, namely the Mikal Bridges, the Josh Harts. OG had a really good game for New York as well. Former Jazzman Jordan Clarkson came off the bench and scored 10 points in 13 minutes. The worst game that we've seen from Landry Shamet, 1 of 8 from the floor, 1 of 7 from 3, a lot of missed shots from New York. And San Antonio brought the physicality to them in Game 3. Wembanyama, with what should have been a flagrant foul right out of the gates, it wasn't called, kind of signaled what San Antonio wanted to do, because San Antonio is a big physical team as a result of not just Wembanyama, but Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle, Julian Champagnie, Dylan Harper. I mean, these are all wings in between like 6'4" and 6'7" that are big, strong, and physical, and they have plenty of defenders that can make it hard for Jalen Brunson. Will they be able to do that again tonight to kind of junk up the game a little bit, slow it down? New York wants to get out and run. They want to play with pace. They want to share the basketball and try to get everyone involved. And then when it's winning time, less than 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, if the game is close, they do rely on Jalen Brunson, and it has worked more often than not. It just hasn't worked against the Spurs. That's the deal. I don't believe this is going to be a blowout. I would be stunned. I think it's a very close, low-scoring game, and I do think the Knicks ultimately get it done. If they can get back to the offense, it had been historic during that 13-game win streak. But look, it has been a fun series. These are two really good teams. And Madison Square Garden will be the stage tonight for Game 4 of the NBA Finals, with the Knicks holding a 2-1 lead. We'll get back to this. Tim McMahon's going to join us coming up in a little bit, but we'll catch our first break of this Wednesday show, and we'll talk Stanley Cup Final and a little Utah Mammoth coming up with Neil Smith, Wednesday edition of The Drive. And it's good to have you along for the ride right here on ESPN 700. Madison Square Garden takes center stage once again tonight, 6:30 Mountain Time for Game 4 of the NBA Finals between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs. The Knicks, as of now, 2.5-point favorite. That over-under is 216.5. Entertainment purposes only. We'll get back to some basketball, but time to talk a little hockey with one of our favorites. Our good friend Neil Smith joins the program on a Wednesday. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
I'm very good, Spencer. How are you doing?
I'm well. I wanted to start with what it's like at Madison Square Garden when a game such as this is being played there as the general manager of the team that won the Stanley Cup in 1994. Game one was interesting in a way. It was a sideshow as Jimmy Dolan invited his buddy Trump, and everybody had to wait 3 hours to get into the building. I had some friends there, and my son and brother were there too, and they said it was a good crowd, not a great crowd. Maybe part of that is pricing a lot of the fans out. But when MSG is really popping, Neil, what's it like to play playoff games in that building?
Oh, it's just spectacular. I mean, the fans are incredible in there, and going to the Garden seems to me that people look at it like just a once in a lifetime event, even though it's not for most New Yorkers once in a lifetime. It's still like that. It's like going to a heavyweight fight, and the whole atmosphere and everything around it. It's very special. I think everybody that goes into Madison Square Garden knows it's a special place because it's in the middle of Manhattan. It's been talked about forever in your life, and I think, and then when you've got your home team competing for a championship, it just brings out everything.
It's interesting to consider this, Neil. It's been 53 years since the Knicks won a championship, and when you guys beat Vancouver in 1994, it had been 54 years since the Rangers lifted the Stanley Cup. What do you think it would mean? A lot of people really believe New York is a basketball town above everything else. The Yankees have been the most successful team. Of course, everybody loves NFL football, so there's the Giants and the Jets, and Ranger fans love the Rangers. But what do you think it would mean to Knicks fans if the Knicks were able to do more or less what you guys did in 1994?
Spencer, I was talking to someone just last night about this phenomenon. That is, what makes somebody a rabid fan of a team? And really what those people do is they cheer for laundry. They're cheering for jerseys. They grew up cheering for let's use the Knicks. They grew up as a little kid cheering for the Knicks, pretending to try to be one of the players, wearing their jerseys. And they're not going to stop that no matter what, because that's their team. And I believe that happens in all the sports. So with the New York Knicks and their huge popularity that they have in that city, and that they have really almost they're almost a national team, because the Knicks name is even in some rap songs and stuff that you hear. I think it would blow the doors off for them to win it. I think it would be incredible. And why I explain what a fan is because it really doesn't matter who owns it. They don't care. They're still cheering for the Knicks. It really doesn't matter how bad the management's been. It doesn't matter. They're still cheering for the Knicks because that's the Knicks. That's my team. And you and I might find it peculiar because we've been in and around it in the depth of it. But that's what I believe a true fan is somebody who, no matter what, they're cheering for that logo.
Yep, absolutely. And if they knew more about the dude who owned the team, maybe they would feel differently. But to your point, they don't seem to care. They're showing up, and they're showing up loud and proud. We have had an unbelievably exciting first four games of this Stanley Cup final, Neil. So obviously Carolina ties it up at 2 games apiece last night. Before we get to some thoughts in a vacuum, just through 4 games, what have you liked most about what you've seen?
Well, you got to like all the scoring because that makes the game so, it's so unpredictable. The comebacks and there was a time not very long ago, and maybe with 2 different teams, where if you got a 2-0 lead like Carolina did last night, you just shut it down. The other team can't even move. It's like trying to skate through mud. But these teams are playing wide open. I love the way Carolina starts every game. They score first. They're right on top of you. They're shooting, as my friend said, they're shooting from the parking lot when they get there. And Vegas is a great story in and of itself, with the comeback kids on some of those teams. Carter Hart, it looked like his career could be over because of some legal issues, but no, he's back and he's playing even better than he did for Philly. Mark Stone has been in and out of the injured list, and now is back and playing phenomenal. Mitch Marner's experience in his hometown of Toronto for all those years was a bad one. He goes to Vegas, and gosh, he looks like Connor McDavid out there. And John Tortorella, who people thought wouldn't be coaching again, suddenly is coaching Vegas with about 5 games to go, and now barely has lost since then all the way through. So they're an amazing story to me. Jack Eichel's another reclamation project, first overall to the Buffalo Sabres. They end up trading him to Vegas, and he's had a whole new life. He's already won one Stanley Cup, and he's trying to win a second. And then you go to the Carolina Hurricanes. I don't know if you know this, but it's an amazing thing that I'm going to talk about on our podcast. The Carolina Hurricanes have 4 players playing in the final last night, and will be again tomorrow night, that were never drafted. They got the goalie, Brendan Bussey, was never drafted. He had a long minor league career and then eventually broke through when he got picked up on waivers by Carolina early this season. Jalen Chatfield, number 5, the defenseman, was not drafted. He played in Windsor in the OHL and signed a 2-way contract when he first signed with Vancouver Canucks, was his first team, and then Carolina. Eric Robinson, the forward, a 4th-line forward, he wasn't drafted. He signed in Columbus. He was traded to Buffalo, and then he went as a free agent over to Carolina. And then Sean Walker, who has played really well on defense, he got signed by LA coming out of Bowling Green State, made the Kings in 1920, and then the Kings traded him to the Flyers. Flyers traded him to the Avs, and then in 24 he signed as a free agent in Carolina, but never drafted. So I find that amazing that these 4 guys are this good and nobody drafted them.
Yeah, the Brandon Bussey story I was unfamiliar with, but it's really cool. Long Island kid, who, to your point, toiled in the minors and finally broke through, and then gets his first playoff start in a Stanley Cup final. But, Neil, as you know, Freddie Anderson brought them to the Stanley Cup final. What do you think they do in net moving forward?
I think they're going to stay with Bussey, and I'll give you 2 reasons. First of all, he's winning. He won last night. So it's common that you would put the same goalie back in again if you win. But second of all, I think Rod Brindamore last night was making an excuse that wasn't true. I think he was saying that Freddie Anderson, they needed to rest him. He's tired, this and that. I think he's injured. I think he got injured when he got his head clipped by the player that went through the crease. And Freddie Anderson has a long history of being injury prone. So it didn't surprise me when he didn't dress last night, but I'm not buying that he's just resting. I think he's hurt, and that's why Kochetkov was on the bench.
Okay, so moving forward, do you have a lean? Who do you think has the advantage? I mean, it's been such a back-and-forth series.
I think right now Carolina has the momentum. They're going home. They play very well at home. I think in Game 3, we went to double overtime. The Vegas had a 4-0 lead in the 3rd period, and in 39 seconds, the Hurricanes scored 3 goals and then tied it up late. Then it went into double overtime, and the winning goal came off the backboards and banked in off of the skate of the goaltender of Bussey and went in. It was a complete fluke. One of the 4 goals, or 3 goals that Mitch Marner scored in that game, actually Sean Walker put it in his own net by accident, obviously. So if I'm them, I'm going like, we're going to beat these guys. I mean, this isn't going to happen anymore. None of this fluky stuff is going to happen. We're going to beat these guys. And I think when they beat them last night, and gave themselves back home ice, because now it's a 2 out of 3 with 2 games in Carolina. I really think that they've got the momentum and they believe in themselves.
So you referenced Jack Eichel. He has 2 goals in 20 games. Now, when they won the Cup in 23, he had 6 goals, also 20 assists, and I think he has 18 assists so far. So he certainly is setting up his teammates. But 2 goals in 20 games equates to an 8-goal season. And obviously, we know he's better than that. Why do you think he is not finding the back of the net?
He's such a pass-first player, and there's been many of them come along that they just love to, or their first instinct is to find the open guy rather than shoot it. A shooter doesn't see the open guy; he just guns the puck as hard as he can. And Jack Eichel's always been a setup guy. Now he should have more than 2 goals because when you can't find anybody, you better shoot the puck. And he does have a good shot, but their power play isn't scoring. Their power play's been god awful, and he, of course, is on it with Marner and that. And they're trying to make the perfect play all the time. Jack Eichel's a great player. I'm really impressed with him over the whole season, and whenever I see him play, he's just got such great hands. But 2 goals is probably not enough for the Vegas Golden Knights in the playoffs.
So Jordan Staal went Bobby Orr on us, right, from 1970. What'd you make of that goal last night? I mean, and also he won a cup at the age of 20, and he's turning 38 in September, and he might win the Conn Smythe Award for the way he's played. Did you see this coming?
No, I didn't. I know Jordan Staal very well as a player, and I know what his attributes are. He's a great leader. He's a big man. He's hard to move out of the front of the net. That's why he's always in front of the net. He scored one last night on a rebound where, the defenseman didn't move him. I don't understand why. And then he got that one you described as a Bobby Orr goal where he was about parallel to the ice and turned around and shot it. He's got, I believe, a goal in all 4 games. And in fact, I'm sure he does. That hasn't happened since Mike Bossy did it in 1982 when he scored a goal in each of the first 4 games of the final. So I think if Jordan Staal would be a favorite to win the Conn Smythe if the Hurricanes win the Cup because of how everybody thinks about him as a great guy, as a leader, he'll give you everything he's got every night. He's been really good. And, we talked about on my podcast today about secondary scoring, and they're not getting prime scoring, whatever you want to call the first line. They're not getting a lot of scoring out of the first line. Where they're getting it from is all these other guys that are chipping in, like Stankoven and like Blake and Taylor Hall and now Jordan Staal. And that's why they're winning. The other team still has to watch Aho, Jarvis, and Svetnikov, who are their top line, but they're not scoring the way these other lines are. They're shutting them down.
So as we kind of move forward here in this tournament, in, of course, the Stanley Cup final, the old saying, Neil, is this is the hardest trophy in sport to win. Do you agree with that, and why?
Well, I'm a hockey guy, so I have to agree. I don't think your dad would agree, but I'm a hockey guy. And I think because of the physical toll that winning 16 games takes on an athlete who's being smashed into the boards every night and trying to block shots with a puck coming at you at 80 miles an hour and all the different things you can go through. I think that's why it's such a war of attrition, trying to keep your guys healthy, trying to keep them rested, trying to keep going and keep going even when you're down a goal or 2. I just think it's really brutal when you play for the Stanley Cup and you're going to play this tournament. You're going to play probably 24 games. Now I know Carolina hasn't played nearly that because they swept the first 2 rounds, but it's a lot of hockey in a very short period of time.
Some news came out that Dylan Larkin has requested a trade. He is the captain of the Detroit Red Wings and has a full no-trade clause, but he did submit a list of 3 teams he would waive that for, which is Vegas, Minnesota, and Florida. So of those 3 teams, who do you think would benefit the most if they're able to grab Dylan Larkin?
Wow, anybody would really benefit from a Dylan Larkin, and the Detroit Red Wings will be very hurt if he's not in their uniform anymore. I know he's requested a trade, but he's got about 5 years to go, I think, at $8 million. And I think Stevie Yzerman is a guy that can get his back up and say, no, I'm not. If you want to be traded, I'll trade you where it's best for the Detroit Red Wings. I'm not trading you where you want to go necessarily, unless that's best for Detroit Red Wings. I'm still stunned by Dylan Larkin wanting a trade, because to me, he's emblematic of that team. To me, he's the hardest working guy night after night after night. He's the only guy on that team that has played a playoff game for Detroit, because they've been out for 10 years. So I'm really stunned at it, and I think the fans will be up in arms if Dylan Larkin gets traded.
So the NHL draft combine has taken place, and we, of course, the NBA draft is coming up. So we did a lot of NBA draft combine because the Jazz have the number 2 pick. Of course, the Mammoth and others are, going to be at the combine and trying to figure out who they're going to select when it comes to the NHL draft, which is going to be June 26th and the 27th. To kind of take us behind the scenes, Neil, as a guy that ran a team once upon a time, when you go to the combine, what are you watching for, and what's that process like as far as medicals, interviews, etc.?
I think what you really want to find out is the character of the player. And you get a firsthand look. You get a chance to actually see them, not in their uniform for 60 minutes, and then you leave and go back to your hotel. It's more about seeing the real kid. How big are they? How strong are they? How fast are they on obviously not on skates, but on foot? And also the mentality of the kids and the character that will come out if you're older than your age. For example, some players, as you know, are more mature than their age would indicate. I think all those things, all those intangibles, you can get a little better idea about.
All right, before I set you loose, I know I've asked you this when you joined us, but we are in Salt Lake City, and, of course, the Mammoth are our pro hockey team here. After a couple of years, they make the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they play Vegas pretty tough, but ultimately out in the first round. I'll just ask you a similar question that I asked you last time you joined us for our Mammoth fan listeners that weren't with us when you answered it. What does the right direction look like next year to indicate that they're not taking the step back? What needs to happen next season?
I think they've got to stick with their plan. And when I say that, what I mean by that is Bill Armstrong's got to go to the draft as well as they possibly can. Start to look at some of the young guys that are ready to graduate into the NHL. Hopefully they'll have some. Fill in some holes where they lose guys, because every team now loses some mature players through free agency. Fill those holes in with players at least as good. But the one thing that I would say over and over and over again is do not vary from the plan of building this team. They've made great strides since they got to Salt Lake City. They weren't so much in the mix the first year when they were the hockey club. If you remember, we've talked all season, and they were, I would say, well, I'm hoping they'll start knocking on the door of the wild card. When all was said and done, they really weren't that close. I predicted they'd be better this past season, and they were. They made great progress, and they made the playoffs, and they went out to a team that's now 2 games away from winning the Stanley Cup. So that's nothing to be ashamed of. I think Bill Armstrong's doing a great job, and I think he'll just continue to build this team so that you'll have a number of years of great teams rather than just 1 or 2 years, and then you got to go back to the drawing board.
Neil, where can people go find that podcast, my friend?
Everywhere. It's called NHL Wraparound. If you can, please subscribe. Please like us. Leave a review if you can. I mean, it's all about, we're on every day during the Stanley Cup. Every single day we're doing updates and things. And we found out, Spencer, that we're in countries that I didn't even know existed. We've had downloads in countries all over the world. So I guess there's somebody out there in every country that must like hockey. But, yeah, you can find it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else that has podcasts.
Neil, thank you, sir, for your time. Enjoy the rest of the Stanley Cup final. We'll chat soon, okay?
Great talking to you.
All right. Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, longtime NHL front office executive, Check out the podcast. NHL Wraparound is where you find Neil. I want to let you know that the Ron McBride Foundation presents The Head and the Heart Saturday, August 22nd at the Utah State Fair Park. Get your tickets and all the info at ESPN700sports.com. Text HEART to 33986 for your chance to score a pair of tickets. That is HEART for 33986 for a pair of tickets. Coming up next, Tim McMahon was just on the NBA Today dais, and he's going to join us on the other side. We'll do some NBA and some jazz with our guy. So keep it here on ESPN 700. Madison Square Garden takes center stage again tonight for Game 4 of the NBA Finals, where the New York Knicks have a 2-1 lead over the San Antonio Spurs. Our next guest was just on television here in the studio. Tim McMahon joins us on a Wednesday. Tim, did I see you throw an elbow at Iman Shumpert?
Yeah, only because my other option within striking distance was Malika Andrews, and I'm a gentleman.
Yeah, do not elbow Malika. The TV was on mute. Give me some context. Why did I see you elbow Iman Shumpert?
I mean, we were talking about Victor the Villain, and I was basically saying this ain't his first rodeo. I mean, we can go back a few series ago, right? And the elbow that he threw to Naz Reid. He wasn't popular in Minnesota after that. They don't like him in OKC. They don't like him here at MSG. He's all right with all that. He doesn't mind being the villain. This is a dude, he loves to create a home court atmosphere and advantage in San Antonio, and he loves to hush it and crush it on the road. And obviously, MSG is a unique atmosphere. Wemby wants to be real quiet.
Were you at Game 3, Tim?
I've been on this whole series.
So tell me what the atmosphere was like in the building. My son went, my brother was there, I had a few high school buddies there, and they all kind of said it was a little bit weird because they had to wait 3 hours to get in, 2.5 hours to get in, and maybe the price points have priced some Knick fans out of the experience. They said it was a good crowd, not a great crowd, but you were there. What was it like?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And honestly, with all the extra security measures, there was probably a little bit too much orange and not enough blue in the crowd, but they got the crowd in. The arena was full, like a good 20 minutes before tip-off. There was definitely excitement. And look, I think the thing that really impacted the crowd more than anything was the fact that the Spurs came out and took it to the Knicks right off the bat in the first quarter. Then the second quarter comes around, like the Knicks were rolling. This place was electric. And then the second half was it was a choppy half, right? The Spurs were out playing the Knicks. They were going to the free throw line a lot. The game was slowed down. And I think that took some energy out of the crowd. And then, Bontemps keeps referring to this just kind of lingering sense of doom and dread and, oh, no. This is a Knicks crowd, an MSG crowd kind of conditioned to expect the bubble to burst, to expect the worst. First loss in 46 nights for them. But, it'll be interesting to see what kind of electricity is in the air tonight.
The too much orange and not enough blue is such a great line. I wish I would have thought of that. But what ultimately, sometimes maybe we overanalyze adjustments. And Mitch Johnson today said, "Look, we know them, they know us through 3 games. What can we do that's different?" But what did San Antonio do schematically to make adjustments in Game 3, maybe that were different than Game 1 and Game 2?
I don't necessarily know there was a whole lot different, but they stuck with Wemby on Josh Hart or on, somebody other than Karl Anthony Towns. And I thought the biggest difference was, unlike the first couple games, Cat didn't punish the Spurs for playing a smaller defender on him or even for, zoning up on him. And at this point, kind of all the cards that are in the deck. It's a matter of when you play them and how you play them. Honestly, I thought the biggest thing that happened in that game from a strategy standpoint was just style of play for the Knicks in the second half. The second quarter, when they scored 42 points, they were playing with the kind of pace that they want to play with. They're, and paced by pushing transition, also paced by just the ball bouncing around, ping, 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 in the half court, spreading the Spurs out, making Wemby, sprint to the corner, sprint to the wing, getting him out of position. Just picking the Spurs apart, and it became a much slower, I would say even lethargic offensive game for the Knicks in the second half, and that's how you go from scoring 42 in a quarter to 47 in the second half.
Legler was talking about San Antonio seemingly just guarding Brunson straight up with Castle and Champagnie and whoever else was given that assignment, as opposed to running an extra defender at him. They did bring some double teams late. But look, Tim, the fact of the matter is, even though there have been some good scoring nights for Jalen, the efficiency against San Antonio is not near what it is against other teams. And we know that down the stretch, if the game is close, we know that the Knicks are going to ride with him because it has worked. But it hasn't really worked against the Spurs. I feel like, either Jalen's got to be a little bit better or maybe they mix it up down the stretch to give him some help. What do you make of that dynamic?
Method Man just walked by me.
Who did?
That's kind of Method Man.
Oh, nice. Nice. Tell him I said. Tell him I. Yeah. Tell him I said what's up. He knows me from back in the day. We were in the kind of the same areas.
Yeah, Wu-Tang Clan playing halftime night. Look, man, it's like you can say straight up, but it's never straight up against the Spurs because you've got the point of attack defender. Stephon Castle's an elite point of attack defender. Dylan Harper's on his way to establishing that type of reputation as well. You know, Champagne's pretty good. So you've got somewhere between a really good to elite point of attack defender, but the whole point of bringing Wemby off of Cat, who can obviously space the floor as well as any big ever has, is you've got him back there as the last line of defense, and he basically just shuts down all the driving lanes. And, yeah, Brunson hasn't been efficient in this series. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the back-to-back MVP, wasn't very efficient in last series. You know, he managed to have an efficient Game 7, obviously not enough to get the Thunder, over the hump. But it was a really difficult series for him. I mean, this Area 51 with Stephon Castle and Victor Wembanyama is not a friendly place to be for a premier scorer. And, so maybe Brunson can muster up a game or two where he is, 16 and 25 instead of 11 and 25, which, by the way, was his best shooting night of the series. But you even look at some of the shots that he's made in this series, man. The two biggest shots of the series for the Knicks, late in Game 1, late in Game 2, those are tough shots. Like, off balance, create just enough space to get it off over a defender, hit a shot. And he's made a bunch of shots at the end of shot clock. Like, as inefficient as he's been, he's made some really tough shots. But, you're just not going to get a lot of clean, easy looks against the Spurs as the primary scorer and the focal point for their defense.
How tall is Method Man?
I think he's tall enough to ref an NBA game. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't size him up like that. I'm going to say he's 6'1" or so.
So I was going to ask you, didn't size him up, but I was going to ask you if you two squared off, do you think you could hang?
One-on-one or in a fight?
In a fight.
He's probably been in one more week than I have been. I don't think I've been in a fight in this millennium, and I don't plan on changing that.
Yeah, we're too old to fight, man. And also, you never know who's packing heat these days. It's not worth it. Stay in your car.
Well, and, some of these Knicks fans now, they get a little feisty. There's a mob mentality. Now, I'm not wearing Spurs colors, so I'll probably be all right, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, that was disappointing, man, to see all those videos of Knicks fans beating the tar out of Spurs fans. I was disappointed by that. Does the heat feel pretty hot in the city right now?
Honestly, I have not seen that with my own eyes. I obviously saw the videos. I certainly haven't. There's not that vibe at the arena. There wasn't that vibe. And like in San Antonio, there were a ton of Knicks fans at the game. It was about 10% of the crowd Game 1, maybe 20% Game 2. And they're loud. They're obnoxious. But there was nothing like over the line. And I do think it's an unfortunate representation of Knicks fans because to me, those aren't people who they're not motivated to support the team. Those are people who want to cause trouble and are using basketball as a reason to do it. How are we doing?
Do you get the sense, 53 years since the Knicks won a title, 27 years since they've been in the NBA Finals, do you get the sense of what a championship would mean? A lot of people believe New York is a basketball city at heart, even though the Knicks have not won a championship since most of us were even born. If they can get it done, what do you think as far as what it would mean to that city and those Knicks fans?
I mean, I do think this is a basketball city first and foremost. Obviously, they support the Yankees, the Giants, and whatever else. But this is, there's a reason they call this the Mecca of basketball. And the vast majority of lifelong New York City residents have never seen a Knicks championship and have grown up wondering if they ever will. If they do, I mean, this place is going to be absolutely bonkers. And, you can feel the energy around the city. What I have witnessed with my own eyes has been a very positive energy, maybe even some nervous energy. But, yeah, if they pull this off, it's going to be bonkers around here.
So you referenced it being, referred to as the Mecca of basketball, and the greats have always talked about what it means to them to play there. Do you get any sense that Wembanyama understands? I mean, one of the great things about this dude is he seems to be so introspective and thoughtful, but we've heard LeBron, Michael, Kobe over the years talk about what it means to them to play well in that building. Is there any of that with Wemby?
Wemby understands the history, but like if we're being real, not necessarily Michael, but like this generation of stars, this has been a place to come and put on a show for fans who appreciate basketball, but like the Knicks haven't been really good. It's only these last 2 years the Knicks have become relevant again after kind of years where, again, this was a great place for stars to showcase, but it wasn't necessarily a difficult place to play. It was a fan base that wanted to be entertained and wasn't necessarily getting entertained a lot by the home team. That's obviously different. And, I don't think, I think Wemby appreciates the history of Madison Square Garden, but doesn't particularly care about that in the moment. This is the final stage that's being played at Madison Square Garden, not the Madison Square Garden stage that's hosting the finals, if that makes sense. And look, as we started off talking about, he understands that he's the enemy, and he's okay with it. He's buffing up Jalen Brunson, just like he's elbowed Nas Reed in chin, just like he basically was talking trash about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander winning the MVP. And so it's a different feel being Madison Square Garden, but I think Wemby's energy is going to be the same if it was Madison Square Garden, if this was in Boston, Cleveland, wherever the last step was.
So when it comes to one of the dynamics that has allowed the Knicks to be so potent offensively, it's what Mike Brown and his staff have done with Karl Anthony Towns to make him kind of that playmaking pivot at the top of the key. Only one assist in Game 3, and Legler also talked about San Antonio running 2 defenders at Karl Anthony Towns to eliminate his passing lanes, which seemed to be effective. But he hasn't scored in the fourth quarter, and there's been a lot of conversation about Cat changing the narrative about who he is as an NBA player because of how good he's been throughout the course of this playoff run. They need more from him, Tim. How do they kind of unlock that tonight to take some pressure off of Jalen down the stretch?
Go back and watch, the first half of Game 2 or most of Game 1. I mean, through 2 games in the series, I think Cal is probably going to be the MVP. And then it was just like an unimpactful Game 3 for him. Only 10 shots, and only 1 assist. And there's a few things here. Number one, Cat has to be more aggressive. Number 2, they've got to make a bigger priority to put him in position to make plays, whether that's the pass, whether that's the shot. And that's a coaching thing. And, there's kind of been this, they figured it out as the season went, and really things clicked in the playoffs. There was a lot of frustration between Cat and Mike Brown this year because Mike Brown doesn't want to run plays. He doesn't want to call, for example, like a post-up for him just to get him involved. He wants to play out of concepts. So they figured out, but Mike Brown's got to emphasize, hey, in the concepts, Cat's got to be involved. And then, Jalen Brunson's got to prioritize it because we all understand he's the face of this franchise. He's going to be the primary ball handler, the primary decision maker. As the point guard, it's his job to make sure that his co-star is in a rhythm and is in positions to where he can be a major contributor.
So, look, the Knicks are still up 2-1. So I'll ask you, I'm not going to ask you for a prediction or anything. I'll just ask you, since you've been around all of these games in person, even though the Knicks are up 2-1, the numbers are so close, and all 3 games have been so close. I'll ask you, who has the better team been through 3 games, and who do you feel like has more momentum as of right now?
I think the 2 different answers. I mean, the better team has been the team that's up 2-1. And I felt like the Knicks took Game 1 from the Spurs, and the Spurs kind of gave Game 1 away, but whatever it is, those are 2 wins. Momentum, I guess you go with the team that won the last game. But my thing is this. I don't necessarily believe in momentum on a game-to-game basis throughout a series, right? Each game is kind of its own entity. It's kind of its own chapter. Momentum is something you got to create on the court tonight. I don't think, they both had a couple sleeps since the last time they played. I don't think momentum carries over like that.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with you. And maybe it is the PTSD Knick fan in me, but I still have this thing. I picked San Antonio in 6, and even though the Knicks won the first 2 games on the road, I still have this thing that's kind of permeating inside of me that still believes San Antonio is the better team and probably will end up pulling this out. I don't know why I feel that way. I just do.
Well, listen, probably because they won 62 games this year. Probably because they were favored going in the series. Probably because they have a 7.5-foot alien who does things that we've never seen before. Probably because I think if you just line the rosters up on paper, you're going to say that they're a more talented team. But the Knicks are a team that has a 2-1 lead in the finals, that's fresh off a 13-game playoff winning streak. That is the second longest winning streak in a single postseason in the history of the league. And I think if it's close down the stretch, and last game was kind of like fake close. If it's really close down the stretch, we've seen that's advantage Knicks. They've got Captain Clutch. They've got a guy who's closed out a lot of playoff games, and the former Clutch Player of the Year in a Spurs uniform, he came through for him. Talking about De'Aaron Fox, he did come through for him in the last game, but he's a guy he's not close to 100%. He's playing on a high ankle sprain that's not going to be healed until he's got some time to put his feet in the sand this summer.
The Mikal Bridges thing is always interesting to me because there's been a lot of criticism, giving up 5 picks for him, and then some nights you see why they did that. Then other nights it's like, dude, is he even aware that it's the NBA Finals? 1 of 5, 2 points last game. What do you believe led to him being such a wallflower? Was that an intentional thing? Was it, Cat not being able to make the plays? Because they're going to need more from him tonight. There's no doubt about that.
Well, he got 2 early fouls and then just never gotten any kind of a rhythm. I do think he's a guy who benefits from Cat being involved and the attention on Cat and the way Cat's able to distribute the ball. I mean, the Bridges you got in game 2, that guy was absolutely worth 5 first-round picks. And then you never saw him show up in game 3. We'll see what game 4 holds for him.
All right, couple minutes left here. We are in Salt Lake City, so I know you've been a busy boy, but we're less than 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. The latest rumor are the Angels are keen on Cameron Boozer as opposed to Darren Peterson at 2, assuming A.J. DeBonsa is off the board at 1. Like I said, I know you've been busy with other things. Just wondering for our Jazz fan listeners who will get mad at me if I don't ask you a Jazz question, what's the latest on the Jazz at number 2 with the NBA draft less than 2 weeks away?
I could speculate. I couldn't give you a real deal intel there. I did tell you last time that my understanding was their research and all the kind of the weirdness with Darren Peterson at Kansas did not show anything that would prevent them from drafting him. But look, man, I think that there's going to be disagreement among people in the NBA front offices about who should go number 2. And if DeBanza goes 1, whether it's going to be Boozer or Peterson. Boozer's safer pick. Peterson has the higher ceiling, or at least that's the perception from the vast majority of people that I've talked to around the league. I think if you are the Jazz, you don't necessarily let positional fit factor in your decision a whole lot, because what you're ultimately looking for with number 2 overall pick is a guy who can be a face of your franchise. They think Ace Bailey has that sort of potential, but another swing on that sort of a player. If positional fit's a tiebreaker, though, obviously they've just made a massive investment in the front court with Jaren Jackson Jr., and I do think there's pretty significant overlap with Boozer there.
Sarah Todd did some good reporting, some doctors refuting the creatine story based off of her conversations. I just wonder, as you talk to people around the league in preparation for the draft, what the conversations sound like regarding, I'll just say, the red flags surrounding Darren Peterson.
Honestly, people I've talked to don't think that whole situation was handled very well by the school. So a lot of the blame fell on the kid. I'm not saying he handled it perfectly either. But there were real, there were real cramping concerns. There's real hesitation on his part because of that. I talked to somebody who felt like Bill Self kind of threw the guy under the bus, and that Kansas didn't really do him right. So, I don't think I don't anticipate this being something that causes Peterson to just tumble down the board. I think the latest he would go is 3.
At the risk of you getting mad at me, I will ask you for a Walker Kessler update as we are inching closer and closer to the start of free agency and the conversations as you understand them between the Jazz and Walker Kessler.
They're going to have to reach some sort of a middle ground. Or, listen, like the Jazz might just hold firm with what they're putting on the table and say, if you think you're worth more than that and you can get a team to sign you to an offer sheet, then we'll have a decision to be made. But, restricted free agency is obviously something that is favorable to a team and not to a player. So I would still bet on Walker Kessler being back in the Jazz uniform next season. But, we'll see exactly on what kind of a contract that might be.
They don't really have a center on the roster without Walker. I mean, Nurkic played pretty well for them, but I can't imagine that would be their contingency plan if they lose Walker, yeah?
I think if they did end up losing Walker, it would probably be in some sort of a sign and trade scenario. My understanding is they'd like to have Nurk back in a backup role. Jaren Jackson Jr. is absolutely not a center. He is a rim protector, but not a center. If Kessler's not there, they'd have to figure out something else. There'd be a glaring void in the roster.
Last thing that I'll set you loose. It is interesting watching San Antonio. It's not just Wembanyama. Wembanyama and Stephon Castle became the first teammates to score 20 points in an NBA Finals game under the age of 22. Oklahoma City is still really good and really young. I just wonder, and this is a recycled, Lowry marketing conversation. I just wonder if the Jazz look at those two teams with how good and how young they are, and maybe they believe their timeline starts now with whoever they take it to alongside Ace and Keontae, making conversation around Lowry marketing pretty interesting, because if their realistic window, Tim, is in 3 to 5 years, Lowry's in his 30s at that point. What do you make of that line of reasoning?
Well, I think that priority number one for the Jazz is to become competitive again. And, they're entering phase 2 of this rebuild, and phase 2 is to become competitive again. And I do think becoming competitive is a really important part of developing your young potential stars. You want Keontae George playing in games that matter, in situations, that matter. Same with Ace Bailey, same with whoever they take at number 2. And then the decisions you're talking about, those are a little bit down the road. Those are more phase 3. Phase 3 type of calls.
Tim, thanks for the time, man. We will set you loose. Enjoy the game tonight and travel safe, okay?
Appreciate you, brother.
All right. The great Tim McMahon covers the NBA for ESPN, covers the Jazz when the Jazz are worth covering, which hopefully will be next year. At Band McMahon is where you find him on social media. Appreciate his time. Live on the ground at Madison Square Garden in Midtown Manhattan, preparation for Game 4 of tonight's NBA Finals. All right, before we catch a break, new-ish client on the show. You may have heard me talking about Game Day Men's Health, but if you have not taken advantage of the opportunity, today is the day to do it, as we have turned our calendars to June, so you have 6 months of data at your disposal to kind of analyze whether or not you've been able to follow up on your New Year's resolution of getting back into shape or losing weight, or maybe you've put on some weight since the new year and you feel like you need to get back in shape in time for pool parties this summer. You don't want to be the dad wearing the T-shirt at the pool party. So, look, they're giving you the same deal they gave me. You should take advantage of it because it worked for me. And almost 3 years later, it's continued to work, which is probably the best part. Because if you follow any of these like fad diets and you lose a bunch of weight, and it's hard to keep it off or get back in shape. It's hard to stay in shape, certainly as you age. So set a goal a few years back to get in the best shape I've been in as an adult, did the things, changed some habits, was starting to eat clean, going to the gym, all the stuff. And I was frustrated about my lack of progress. Talking to a friend about it one day, he asked me if I had ever supplemented testosterone before, which I had not. And so he recommended Game Day Men's Health. And I got a hold of them, and they put me through the process that they're offering to put you through, which is this. Number one, it's a free consultation with no obligation. You should do that no matter what, because it costs you no money. It takes like 20 minutes out of your day. So go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now and schedule that. Cottonwood Heights are bountiful, very accessible locations right off the freeway. You go in, free consultation, which is this. They take some blood. And then 10, 15 minutes later, they get the results. They go over your levels with you, and they say, hey, you're doing pretty well here, but you're a little bit deficient over here, and this is where we can help. Now, for me, that was supplementing testosterone and then utilizing some of their peptides, and it's worked for me. So I would imagine it would work for you as well. But if you need to lose a lot of weight, they also have the semaglutide, tirzepatide, whatever those things are that helps you lose weight. They have that too. But here's the kicker. After you go through the consultation, if you sign up with them, they'll give you 50% off your entire membership for the rest of the year. It makes all their products very affordable. It's the very same deal they give me. They're offering it to you. It's our good friends at Game Day Men's Health. So go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now, schedule that consultation, and then tell them you heard me talking about it on the show. 50% off all the products the entire year. Get back into shape in time for summer with our good friends at Game Day Men's Health. All right, we'll catch a break. Keep it here. More on the other side on ESPN 700. All right, we're going to chat with Easton Folster coming up. Easton is the executive director of the Utah Golf Association. We'll get an update on my endeavor to hashtag shrink the game, which Easton is not a fan of. And then Sam Bruckhouse, our buddy from Sumer Sports, will join us a little bit later on to do some college and pro football. Got mandatory training camps in the NFL going on right now, and obviously inching closer and closer to the start of college football. Even though June is kind of a quiet month for college football, it has been a really busy news cycle. And also, we're looking at a situation where June has become this massive recruiting month, and our friends at Ute Zone have been doing some good reporting about Utah football recruiting. So we'll get to some of that with Sam coming up. But, of course, the story that has dominated the landscape of college football is the Brendan Sorsby ruling, a temporary injunction that a lot of people have been reacting to over the course of the past 72 hours or so. And every day brings another situation where somebody else chimes in. Kirby Hocutt issued a lengthy statement on Wednesday today, continuing to support Brendan Sorsby's recovery from an admitted gambling addiction, while also not ruling out the possibility of him playing the season, which it looks like he's going to do. Of course, the courts have deemed that he will miss the first two games of the season, Oregon State and Abilene Christian, I believe, two games that Tech's going to win by 1 million, even if I was playing quarterback for them. So, look, it's a slippery slope, and I was talking about this with Sean during Crosstalk, and Porter, we'll bring you into this conversation today because you are both somebody who knows a lot about college football and understands what addiction means as far as harmful situations in life, much like I do. And I want to give this conversation the space that it needs, and also kind of trying to do my best to understand the way gambling addiction is treated on the scope of addictions and where we're at in this kind of ecosystem of helping people find their way if they get loose with certain things. So I reached out to an addiction specialist who's going to join us tomorrow. He was going to join us today, but we ran into some scheduling issues. Because the funny thing about this job is oftentimes topics will permeate their way through the sports kind of news cycle and ecosystem that we have to cover as a sports talk radio show, but certainly no expert in this field as it pertains to the way that gambling addiction is treated. Because ultimately, the bottom line is this. Jeffrey Kessler, who Brendan Sorsby hired as his attorney and who is literally the best in the world at what he does and constantly is in the world of sports, trying to help athletes gain eligibility, trying to help leagues and players. I mean, he's been doing it forever. And when the news surfaced that Brendan Sorsby had hired Jeffrey Kessler, my first reaction is at some point Jeffrey Kessler is going to find the best possible angle to get this kid back on the field, because that's what he does, and that's how he's made all of his money, and that's how he's garnered this reputation of being the best literally in his field. And you know, what has happened with all of these situations, whether it's the Trinidad Chambliss kid or Diego Pavia suing for his JUCO year back and Chambliss trying to get more eligibility, is these kids and their teams find these lawyers. And these lawyers, of course, have relationships with throughout the community with judges. A lot of judges once upon a time were lawyers. Maybe you went to law school with the judge down in Lubbock or wherever. And so the lawyers kind of go judge shopping. And I would imagine behind the scenes have these conversations about probably some pretty shady things that will go down in order to get the ruling that they want. And obviously there's no public knowledge of that. I'm just drawing conclusions because what happens is these lawyers find these judges in certain districts that will grant them the ruling they're looking for. Instead of taking the risk to find some random judge in some random city, it's like, all right, we got a guy in Lubbock. He might be a Texas Tech fan. Think we have an angle here. But ultimately, the angle that Kessler and his team took is that this gambling addiction that Brendan Sorsby was suffering from had an adverse reaction on him, and the NCAA is taking away his ability to be around teammates and coaches and be in a healthy environment for him to recover and move forward to be able to do what he's good at and hopefully make a living in it one day. That was their angle, okay? So it has been met more or less summarily with an eye roll, and you understand why, okay? But what I want to do is understand exactly what the addiction community believes gambling addiction is, and is it on par with the other addictions that we're all more familiar with, namely drugs and alcohol or sex or anything you use to escape your life is identified in this community as an addiction if you don't feel like you can stop, whether it's doom scrolling for 7 or 8 hours a day. You know, you're on your phone to distract yourself from what you do during your regular day-to-day life. Television, video games, right? I mean, those are the kind of newer generation type addictions that people talk about a little bit more, as opposed to what addiction is basically labeled at more consistently, which is drugs and alcohol, right? So I reached out to Ed, and I just simply asked him, you know, how does gambling addiction treatment compare to that of drugs and alcohol, and how does it compare in the scope of day-to-day functionality as far as it affecting your life? And so just a couple of things he had to say. And again, we're going to bring him on tomorrow. And he said, look, the way you treat it is pretty similar. You try to help the addict identify key triggers and key beliefs that lead them to the action of gambling. And then you go deeper to try to discover childhood insecurities, childhood trauma, then connect it with the addiction. What are you escaping from? And then just the bottom line of the definition of an addiction, which is when people have behaviors that are hurting their lives and that are having negative consequences in their lives and in the lives of others. And either they keep doing it and they can't stop. Okay, so that's the real definition of addiction, which according to Ed fits gambling, also fits substances, sex, etc. And then as far as how it affects your day-to-day life, it's different for everybody. And ultimately, it's hard to understand exactly what that means for a gambling addict. And I talked about this with Sean earlier. There's a good chance if you're listening to the show, maybe you have found yourself sideways with drugs or alcohol. And you know when you do. You do. You have to be honest with yourself. But it's pretty hard to hide it if you're around friends and family and you're in a really bad spot. And if you haven't been loose with it, there's a chance you know somebody who has. A family member and a friend. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably saw signs. Or maybe you've received a phone call from a friend or a family member to say, hey, my brother's in a bad spot, or our friend's in a bad spot. We need to talk to him. We need to sit him down. There are bad signs. Maybe a relationship is fractured. Maybe a job is lost. Maybe an arrest happens. Maybe you can see his health deteriorating. But when it comes to gambling, it's not as easy to see it because it can be kept in secret. And I feel like the only time that it actually becomes prevalent and part of the conversation is a situation like Brendan Sorsby where he broke the rules, or B, the most obvious sign, somebody's losing their home or their family is falling apart because they can no longer support their family because every time they get paid, they transfer their paycheck to their gambling app and they're putting it all on whatever. Or as the stories go, I mean, I've referenced the Real Sports with Brian Gumbel storyline once upon a time. They did this entire episode on the effect of legalizing gambling in England, in the greater London, England area, on the Premiership, on EPL, on soccer. And all of these interviews with gentlemen who literally took second mortgages out on their home to bet on Chelsea winning the Premiership or whatever. And how many people were homeless who once upon a time had a good job and had good careers and had a stable family that could not stop gambling, right? And so just trying to understand exactly where we're at with gambling addiction, and the way it's been explained to me is where we're at with treating gambling addiction is kind of where we were about 30 years ago treating drugs and alcohol. We just have more of an understanding of brain chemistry. We have more of an understanding of what a dopamine spike looks like when you win a bet. And you can directly draw it to the same dopamine spike that a heroin addict gets when he injects heroin into his arm, right? So, I mean, look, ultimately, the piece of the Brendan Sorsby storyline that I find the most troubling, and I can say this from personal experience, consequences are an important thing to deal with when you have made a bad decision. Even if you have made a bad decision when you're in the throngs of addiction, even when you've made a bad decision, when a substance has its claws in you and you're trying to get them out and you don't know how to do it, the problem is, regardless of the events or dynamics that led to your decision making, consequences are an important part of the puzzle to help you get out of that spot. And what Brendan Sorsby has in front of him now is just a lack of consequence as a result of damaging decision making that is literally plastered on every wall of a locker room that you go into in sports. It's the thing that's everywhere, okay? You are not allowed to do this because it directly affects the integrity of our product. And up until now, my understanding of the way teams and leagues and governing bodies treat people that are in their ecosystem that gamble on the product is death sentence. You are gone. Lifetime bans. You cannot do this anymore. We have precedents set in college football with a defensive lineman from Iowa a few years back who placed one bet on the women's basketball team at Iowa, and he was done playing college football. And we know the deal with Sorsby. A number of bets, 90 grand, 40 on the team that he was playing for, and I don't care that he wasn't playing in games. He was in meetings, he had intel, and I don't care if he was betting on his team to win or lose. That doesn't matter to me. It is the rule that all of these coaches and athletes are yelled at about following, and not just coaches and athletes. If you work for a league, if you work for a team, you cannot do this. And the reason is simple. If your consumer starts questioning the integrity of your endeavor and your product, it is a very slippery slope for you to allow. And what this ruling has done is not just enabled Brendan Sorsby to potentially at some point continue the behavior because he didn't suffer any consequences. It also gives unspoken permission to other people in the ecosystem to do the same thing. And again, with this conversation, I want to bring all the dynamics into play. I want to learn what the medical community is saying about gambling addiction. I want to learn whether or not, we need to start talking about it the same way we do other addictions, and whether or not Brendan Sorsby should be given the grace, if he really was in this horrible place, to get him out of that place and then allow him to go on and live his life, because I believe in that. I do. It's just unprecedented. And when it comes to college football and the way that, we try to consume this sport, I think the best example we talked about yesterday, like Brendan Sorsby had a really bad game against Utah last year, or did he? Right? Like, that's the problem. So, Porter, again, as a guy who loves college football and a guy that understands all these dynamics as well as anybody, as the days kind of pass and more people chime in, where are you at with this story?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to be budged on this story really at all. It's a very firm stance I have on it, and I want to echo but also unpack a lot of what you said there. First and foremost is that, yes, this is something we should be taking seriously and should be giving grace to people who do have an addiction, whether it is sports gambling or otherwise. We just did a mental health radiothon the other day, right? It's something we have to, as you said, give grace to. And I do think Brendan Sorsby deserves some grace in that regard. The treatment center that was paid for, the support that he's getting, all of that is something I think should continue. That does not equal or equate to being paid millions and millions of dollars to play college football. In fact, Spence, I would love to pose this question to some of the folks at Texas Tech who are digging their heels in. How does, if you are claiming someone has an addiction to sports gambling and an anxiety disorder, how does making them the face of that very thing, literally the face of that very thing nationwide, and then throwing him out onto the field, how does that support his anxiety disorder and his gambling addiction in any way, shape, or form? In fact, how does it not make it 1,000 times worse, right? Like, that to me doesn't make sense on its face. I know it's the argument they're using in court, so they have to stick by that line. But to me, making someone the poster boy for sports gambling in college football, when your claim is that you're trying to support him through sports gambling addiction and an anxiety disorder, doesn't make a lick of sense. Away from all of that, you mentioned the consequence thing. When you, again, Texas Tech, a lot of folks around there are bringing up that there are other athletes with legal troubles, with assault charges, with all of the above. Guess what? They're in court dealing with those. They're in jail. They are fighting with lawyers and doing the same thing that Brennan Sorsby is doing away from the field. That's something that will continue to happen because there are laws in place. Not just rules, laws. So Brennan Sorsby bet underage through a proxy, right? Through a family member or a friend multiple times. Those are both state and federal laws. He bet in the state of Texas, where sports gambling is not legal in any way, shape, or form. That is a state crime. If you really want to parse through it, there are 7 to 8 statutes that he has broken, federal or state crimes, and has not, to this point, been under sort of any sort of indictment or otherwise. Beyond that, you broke not just a rule, the cardinal rule in sports, one that you are taught about every locker room you step in, every organizational meeting you step in. There are poster boards if you are playing for the NCAA on your campus, in your locker rooms, all of the above. The rule. He broke the rule. If there are no consequences for him, but anybody breaking the rule, what about all the other rules, right? Are we just throwing that up in the air? Are we just moving into a different space? Because that is, I think, the main question here. It has really nothing to do with Brennan Sorsby and everything to do with the college football world at large. A lot to get into here, but I really, I think that we're in a space where there is the mental gymnastics coming from the folks who are saying they are supporting Brennan Sorsby while I think enabling him. And on the other side, the fact that he is right now, up to this point, not only skirting NCAA consequences, but literal state and federal law consequences. We'll see how that turns out in the future because investigations could very well be going on right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they were. But yeah, man, I think there's a lot here and a lot to unpack. None of the results that I think would be either one, supporting Brennan Sorsby or ensuring that he gets proper and fair consequences. None of them have anything to do with him seeing the football field on a college level. That part of it is only being argued by people who have interest in seeing Texas Tech win football games.
Yeah, and to underscore one more thing, and look, I don't want to reveal anything you're uncomfortable with, but it's safe to say you've had addiction surrounding you throughout your life, as I have, correct?
Absolutely.
So have you ever seen an addict get well or even make positive steps without facing the decisions that the addict made, with some sort of repercussion, with some sort of, I don't want to say punishment, but again, consequences for decisions, regardless of the dynamics that are in your life when you make the decision? I want to be sensitive to all of them.
Right.
You make a decision, you get caught. If there's not a consequence piece to this process, have you ever seen an addict get well or even make steps to get better?
I really don't think so. And taking that a step further, I've really never seen an addict get better when they're only further surrounded by attention and fanfare about that very thing, right? Mm-hmm. That's the part that really kind of grinds my gears is the Texas Tech statements, the Cody Campbell going out and saying, we're behind him, we're helping him. You're turning him into the face of sports gambling, and you're putting him on the football field where he has an addiction to sports gambling. Like, where is the argument there that actually makes sense? Because I have not heard it yet.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't make an alcoholic a Jack Daniels rep.
Or have him go hang out at a bar every week.
Yeah, the old saying.
Every Saturday, you're at the bar, hanging with all your friends, doing the thing that you were doing that you are claiming in court is why you are doing this, because you wanted to be closer to your teammates and all the above. Go hang out with them at the bar on Saturday.
It's a fair point. There's this old AA saying, like, you only go to the barber shop so many times before you actually get a haircut. And, Yeah, I mean, I guess another piece of this would be if we are to believe what you're asking us to believe, which is gambling as an addiction is on the same level of drugs and alcohol, then if that's the case, you should not be around the dynamics that led you to using, if we use another term, right?
Precisely.
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, the other piece of this, as far as the reaction from Big 12 athletic directors and folks that run the member institutions in the Big 12, like I wonder what the outcry would be if it was the backup quarterback at West Virginia, right? Because there is this feeling and this sense in the Big 12 conference that Texas Tech has separated themselves from everybody else as a result of their oil money and Cody Campbell and writing checks and paying big money to bring transfers to Texas Tech that led them to being the best team in the league last year. And honestly, I don't know that it was close. I mean, if BYU was the second best team last year, Texas Tech smoked them twice. So it's like Brendan Sorsby, Cincinnati transfer, number one transfer in the ESPN transfer portal, reportedly $5 million to grab him to play quarterback for a team that everyone else in the Big 12 is looking up at. And the gap between Texas Tech and everybody else appears to be large right now and maybe growing even more. So we have to be honest about this. Part of the outcry is that this is a team that everyone else is looking up to. This is a team that has clearly separated themselves from everyone else in the conference. And the starting quarterback from the banner team in the Big 12 is the one caught in the crosshairs. I certainly think this is part of that conversation. But look, like I said, I'm not here to provide any answers. I try to reach out to people that know a lot more than I do when topics like this come up so I can properly speak about them and unpack them. So we'll get Ed on tomorrow, and maybe he can shed some light on what the medical community believes about treatment for gambling addiction and maybe what all of us could learn a little bit more to have a little bit more understanding or what have you. But again, you remove the consequence piece from any dynamic such as this when a poor decision is made, regardless of the dynamics that are going on in your life. When you make that decision, you make the decision, there are consequences that have to be in place if you ever want to get well. At least that's my understanding of how this stuff works. All right, in this moment, and Hollywood Undead are taking over the complex on October 20th. The ESPN 700 wants to send you and your concert buddy to the show. Tune into the Sean O'Connell Show this week to score a pair of tickets. 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We're going to do a little golf, little Nick basketball with Easton Folster. We'll do more football later on with Sam Bruckhouse from Sumer Sports. We'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the show and say goodnight at 6 right here on ESPN 700. All right, Game 4, NBA Finals tonight, Madison Square Garden, better known as the world's most famous arena or the Mecca of basketball, where the New York Knicks will try to take a 3-1 lead over the San Antonio Spurs, and the Spurs will try to lock it up at 2 games apiece. The Knicks are a very slight favorite. 2.5 points is the line. Our next guest, well, he's better known for his day job as the executive director of the Utah Golf Association, but lifelong New York Knicks fan. It's great to welcome my friend Easton Folster back on the show on a Wednesday. Easton, what's up, man? How are you?
Good, Spence. How are you doing?
I'm good. First of all, your videos indicate, have you been in New York? Have you been in the big city following this series?
Oh, I wish.
Oh.
I was in New York a few months ago, though, and we actually caught the regular season matchup between the Knicks and the Spurs, where the Knicks won, so that was awesome. But no, I wish I was there. Maybe I'm acting like I was, so everyone thinks I am.
Yeah, it's, you have some good video posting. Okay, we're going to do some golf in a minute, but I want your New York Knicks origin story. Your New York Knicks fandom origin story as a local Utah boy. What drew you to the Knicks?
Yeah, it's always a good question. Obviously, being a '90s kid, I growing up in Utah had an excuse to and a good team to cheer for, being that the Jazz were incredibly relevant in the '90s. But I remember an exact play where Patrick Ewing stole a ball at half court in a game that I was watching. I was probably at this point 6 or 7 years old, and he went down and dunked it, and just became a massive Patrick Ewing fan when I was little. And I guess you could say that, the rest is history. So for some reason, I didn't attach to the Jazz. Probably had every reason to, but Patrick Ewing was my guy, being a kid from Utah, and just have stuck with him. And it's, Spence, as you well know, it's been dark for a lot of years, and we're starting to maybe see the light, but a lot of nerves, this week too.
Yeah, we just had Tim McMahon on the show, and we were talking about, kind of, he's in New York, and he was at Game 3, and he was just on the NBA Today dais, so he's basically in the Garden, and he said the energy level is high, but there's just this like undercurrent of anxiety and fear, and I absolutely feel it. Like, even though they're up 2-1, and even though they won the first 2 games on the road, I just have this thing inside of me. And look, we also should acknowledge that San Antonio is very good, and this kid they have is historic and generational. And the old saying goes, the team oftentimes that has the best player in this league usually wins the NBA championship. What is your anxiety level juxtaposed to your confidence level about both tonight and the rest of the series?
Oh, it's pure anxiety, as you mentioned. I mean, it's almost like a friend had asked, how I wanted the series to go. It's just like, just sweep us, don't have us get up 2-0 and then have to, get this feel of it, maybe a taste of it. But obviously, I agree with what you had said. I mean, in Game 3, and far be it for me to break down basketball, which I won't do, but just as a fan, it even kind of felt like the stadium and the players just were a little bit uneasy. I just feel like there's this anxiety. I guess, 50 years, title drought will do that to a fan base. And when you get so close, it just feels like it's in your grasp. But this is a big game tonight, as you know. I mean, I think the series kind of rests on this game. It's either 3-1 or the Knicks, cough up a incredible 2-0 lead. So huge opportunity. It's right in front of them. So, but yes, the simple answer is the anxiety far outweighs any level of confidence.
One of the things that I love about the videos you post is your little guy, pretending like he's Jalen Brunson on the mini hoop that you have in the house. And, my son was at the Garden for Game 3 in the John Starks jersey that I bought him a few years back. What's it been like to see your little guy kind of latch onto this? And Jalen is his guy, right? Like, that's the jersey he wears.
Yeah, Jalen's his guy. I'm not sure he had much of a choice growing up. I mean, this was kind of given to him, as maybe most dads know. But I'll tell you, he's a legitimate fan. He could probably name, I dare say, at least 10 players on the team. Once you start getting to the end of the bench, it might get a little rough for him. But he is a valid Knicks fan, and he's watching every game, staying up late. So he's into it. It's been a lot of fun. I don't particularly love to have him see me like that, as stressed as I am during some of the games, but we work through it okay.
Looks like he's got a little skill, right? Are you raising him to be a ball player?
Yeah, that's nice of you to say. I mean, he loves it. We'll see where his path takes, but I love basketball too, and so any sport we can get him in at this point, we'll take it. But I would say he's taking a liking to basketball for sure.
The big question is he swinging a golf club yet?
He's not. Maybe we'll get there at one point. Certainly want him to enjoy the game that I've kind of make my career on. But no, he hasn't gotten into golf yet. In fact, he kind of said, I turned on golf on a Sunday afternoon, and there'll be a few people that can relate to this. He said golf's boring, and so it is hard to match up, NBA Finals energy with flipping it over to golf. I can appreciate that. So we'll get him there though.
As I've often told you, I thought golf was boring until I was 40, and now, as you know, I'm very much addicted to it. I don't know, man. I just think as a kid, at least for me, I wanted to chase a ball around or shoot a ball or run around.
Yep.
No part of me wanted to just stand still and try to hit this little tiny ball with a stick that felt impossible anyway,
You're exactly right. I think golf finds people at different times, and I do think there's always a time, and sometimes it finds people a little bit later in life. Because I'm with you. I think chasing a ball is a little more engaging, especially at his age. I mean, he's 5, and so I think he likes to run around, and maybe most kids kind of agree with that. But golf finds people at different stages, and whenever people can get in is great for sure.
Tell me what's taking up most of your time right now over the UGA. I know it's a busy time of year with all of the tournaments, the AM tournaments, the qualifiers. What's going on right now with you guys over the Utah Golf Association?
Yeah, it's perfect timing for this call. We're kind of entering. I mean, we've had championships, over the last number of months, but we're really entering into our prime championship month. We've got I'd say even our state amateur kind of championship month. We have our junior state amateur coming up next week at Bonneville. Followed there, closely behind. In the first week of July is our Utah State Amateur at Soldier Hollow. And I know you're planning on coming up and participating in Media Day, and hopefully we'll see you on site. So we're excited about that. That's our crown jewel, and something we take a lot of pride in. And I've mentioned on this show before, the moniker that we're really proud of is it being the longest continuously held golf tournament in the world. And so and there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, by the way. So we're looking forward to continuing, that streak. I'm excited about the State Am. And then just 2 weeks after that, we have our Women's State Am right there in the third week of July. So we are in the thick of it, but as golf administrators, we like to be out on the golf course, and that's where home is for us. And so we're excited about the next couple weeks.
What day is Media Day for the women's tournament so I can put it in my calendar?
Yeah, good question. I'll get back to you.
All
I'll
right.
text you. I think it's there in that second week, but I'll get you the official date.
Okay, fair enough. So July 1st is Media Day. I have that in my calendar. I got to get the women's tournament in my calendar. We'll do that at another time. How has my proposal of hashtag shrink the game being received over at the UGA?
Yeah, as you might imagine, very poorly. Yeah, no, I know you always say it in jest, but I get it. Golf's booming, and there's pros and cons with that. We obviously see most of the pros, but I can see it from the player standpoint of it is really difficult right now to just, the old days I think are gone of waking up, or even on a Friday evening booking a Saturday morning time. Those days are probably long gone. I don't know that they're coming back. I don't know that it's a bad thing for the industry, for those that make their money, promoting golf. But I can certainly see from the player point of view that it is difficult right now in Utah to get a tee time. And then when you get out there, everybody would love to play in 3.5 hours. And I know that that's not, a reality most days. And so I know everybody's working hard to make sure the experience is good. But yeah, golf's booming. And I'd say part of the problem in Utah, as you well know, is the supply and demand just aren't meeting up. Right now, we're short on golf courses to be able to meet demand, and hence that's why tee times are so hard to come by. There's just more golfers than we have tee times, and so, yeah, no, your points are always valid. And I know you say it in half jest, but yeah, golf's great. It's growing. we're proud of it, but there are definitely some player enjoyment things that I think the industry's got to work through.
And yeah, I mean, I do say it in half jest. It's just the 5.5 hour, 6 hour rounds that get a little exhausting. And then, yeah, I mean, tee times these days, if you are not online as soon as that thing opens up, I mean, like, I'm talking about 5 minutes later, you're screwed. You know what I mean? Like, it happens quick.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've even gotten out and played golf, and I work in the industry, so it's tough. Like I said, I would love to have more golf courses here in Utah. I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen anytime soon, given that we're kind of landlocked here on the Wasatch Front. But hopefully, from my seat, book tee times are a good thing. Slow play is not a good thing. But full tee sheets is a good thing for the industry. But, yeah, we want everybody to feel like, our main product is selling a handicap index. And so we want people to feel like there's value in that handicap index, that they're able to get out and play a bunch of rounds and play as often as they'd like. And I do know that that's a little bit of a challenge that we've got to solve, not just in Utah, but, frankly, nationally at this point.
So all of that is to say, the reason I had you on the show is, can I name drop you just to get standing tee times on any course I want in the Valley?
Yeah,
nice.
You absolutely can name drop me at any golf course. I think you'll be rebuffed 99% of the time anyway, but you are always welcome to drop my name and see if you get lucky. But I've got my doubts.
Fair enough. And leaning back into the space of the growth of this game, it has been remarkable. It's interesting because every sport seems to like have a moment, right? And you never really know when that moment is going to be or what that moment looks like and how it manifests. Like for basketball, it was this perfect storm in the 90s of the dream team. And then as Magic and Larry were kind of moving aside, Michael Jordan became this global icon. And the effects of that are reverberating to this day because basketball on a global scale is the second most popular sport. And soccer is one by far, but basketball is two by far. Because, and we're seeing the fruits of that with a player like Victor Wembanyama. You could make an argument that 5 of the top 7 players in pro basketball are not American players. I mean, Shea's from Canada. There's Giannis. There's Luka. There's Jokic. Football has had the real estate of American sports fans for a long, long time. And the popularity of American football seems to be kind of embedded in the culture of what the NFL is and how it is simply American. On a global scale, it does not measure, which is kind of interesting. They're trying with some of their global initiatives. The World Cup in soccer in '94 leads to the implementation of MLS, and we'll see what the World Cup does for this cycle. Baseball had the summer of '98 with Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, even though they clearly were cheating. It was a very big boom for a sport that had lost a big piece of real estate after the lockout. How would you articulate how this moment came about for your sport and the growth that you've seen, and do you see it slowing down anytime soon?
Yeah, well said on some of those other sports, and I do think that there's some similarities, right now with golf, and I'd kind of overlay it with the Tiger boom, right, in the late '90s, early 2000s, when he was just dominant, and everybody kind of found golf, and there was that spike in golf, and then kind of naturally it dipped a little bit, and golf's always been something, and probably always will, that tracks the economy a little bit. It tracks discretional spending. And so, that's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, since COVID in 2020, it's odd. And I'm cautious to say we benefited from a global pandemic, but golf did just that. More people found the game during 2020 than ever before. And, I think the golf industry's goal was to try to keep as many of these people, playing. They found it for certain reasons. It was accessible during a time when a lot of things weren't accessible. And so, yes, in the last 5 or 6 years since COVID, it has continued to go up. You ask about whether I see it declining. I think all things have, they ebb and flow. I'd be surprised. I don't know that we can keep, this rate of growth up. At some point, as I mentioned, the demand's going to far outweigh the supply, and maybe we're getting there right now. Population growth in Utah, more people coming to the state. And so I don't know that it's going to, certainly tank at any point. I think golf has found its space in people's lives for sure. And hopefully we can nurture them with not having, as you've mentioned, 5 and 6 hour rounds, because that's not an awesome experience. But I don't know that I see it tanking. I would be surprised if we continue this growth rate, though. I don't know, if we can keep that up, but golf is on a hot streak right now, and people are finding the game and coming to the game in different, avenues. I think golf, the industry, we've done a good job of kind of ridding ourselves of some of the misnomers and the reputation of golf, that it's for the select few or that it's for the rich. I don't think that that's necessarily the case anymore. We've tried to open the door, to more backgrounds. And so I think there's a lot of encouraging signs for sure. But I don't know that I see it slowing, but I don't know that it's going to continue to spike like it is right now.
Do you have any data? Because I find it interesting now as I'm just out either hitting balls on the range or actually playing around, where I look around and it's old men, young men, older women, respectfully, younger women, kids. There is not a central casting person who enjoys golf like there used to be anymore. It was just like a middle-aged white man sport. And now, everyone on the course looks a little bit different, and it's not the same sex. It's not the same age. Do you have any data on where the game has grown the most?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, there is data. I don't know that I can necessarily quote it right now, but I would mention that your observations are exactly right. We've made progress in people of color and golfers of color, of youth, different genders, obviously, more females coming to the game. I think you're exactly right. And geez, the last, 20, 30, 40 years, golf was viewed as kind of this rich, middle-aged white man game, as you said. And I think we've done a really good job in opening the doors, to more backgrounds. And I think that has been one of the more inspiring pieces of this growth. But I also think it's one of the pieces that's going to help us sustain this growth, that more people are coming to the game, that it's more accessible. I mean, I've got a bunch of nephews that were all-star soccer players, and now they just play because they just love to get out with their friends and play. And I would have said 10 years ago, they would have thought, golf was lame, I'm not playing that, but they're getting out and playing. And so it's a lot of fun to see. And I think some of that growth from different backgrounds is going to help us, sustain, some of this growth that we've seen in the last number of years. So I think it's exciting. Your observations are right. I think, from an industry standpoint, that's exactly what we want to see is people of all backgrounds getting to enjoy the game.
You know what I think is going to be really interesting? I mean, look, the great golfers, they've always been top shelf. The pros are insane. And as you play more, and actually had a chance to be an honorary observer at Arnie's tournament 2 years ago. So I was able to walk with some pros and to watch them solve problems. It's like, holy smokes, that is an insane level of talent and work and the ability to see through things that it's hard for an amateur to completely understand. So, look, most all of them started when they were 2 or 3 and made their way through the youth circuits and played high school and then college. I mean, that pathway has always been there. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the pro golfers look like in 10 to 15 years as a result of this boom, where so many young people aren't just playing basketball and football and soccer, but so many of them have leaned into golf. I mean, while it's amazing to watch the pros now, I wonder what the pro circuit's going to look like in 10 to 15 years when we have this mass data size, the sample size of young people who are A, playing, B, have access to great training, C, have access to great equipment, and just the understanding of what it takes to get better. It's going to be interesting to see, Easton, what this looks like in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, hopefully the pool deepens, right? Similar maybe in some ways to how soccer is in the U.S. You got to deepen the pool, and hopefully more kids pick golf as they grow up. We've already seen in golf that I feel like it's becoming a more athletic sport. People care more about, I think you cited this as, their fitness, their training, the Rory McIlroys, that are legitimate athletes. Whereas in the past, I don't know that was always the case with golf. Certainly Tiger. But I don't know that John Daly, necessarily. I'm sure he was an athlete in certain aspects, but I think more athletes will come to the game, and I think that'll push the game forward. And it feels like we're just about top down on skill level. They're amazing, as you stated, and when you get to see them live, I remember getting to be the referee for a match in the U.S. Amateur, and I drew Ludwig Oberg. And so I got to follow him closely, and there were times where I was right there thinking, oh yeah, he's gonna punch this out. He's blocked out. No, nothing. Just, smoking under the tree, play a high cut into the green, and it's just, as you stated, it's just amazing. And so it's only going to get better, which is kind of crazy to think about because they're pretty top notch, as you well know. So it will be exciting, and I think more athletes are coming to the game maybe than ever before. So it'll be fun to track.
All right, if the folks of the UGA will not embrace my hashtag shrink the game endeavor, can I offer one more option?
Of course, yeah. Yep.
We outlaw double dates.
That's funny. I haven't seen that tons, but you're exactly right. We've all been behind. Yes, we've all been behind at some point a group that's maybe trying the game out for the first time. And I would say I know you've probably been behind a few double dates, and those can be grueling. There's nothing wrong with finding the game on the driving range, and then once we're ready, let's take it to the golf course. So maybe that's how I can help you is you don't immediately have to go out and play the golf course. Let's maybe find our swing a little bit on the driving range, or even some of these simulator spots. Maybe that's how I can help you out a little bit is let's have them try it out and find a swing first. Then we can have some double dates on the course.
Brilliant idea. But in addition to that, I'm also trying to help relationships survive. I'm trying to do people a service because the golf course is no place to try to hash out an issue that you're having. And if somebody's not playing well and somebody decides to get frustrated and they go at their partner, more than anything else, Easton, I'm trying to preserve marriages. That's my goal.
Hey, I can appreciate that for sure. Yeah, my wife doesn't play, and a lot of times people ask, "Oh, do you wish she did?" And my answer is always pretty simple, no, not necessarily. This is my passion, and she has her passions and hobbies. So I get it. That's funny. But yeah, I think there's a time and a place for everything. I know I'll be hashing out some of my issues. If the Knicks don't find a way to close this out, I'll be out on the golf course and, trying to hash out some problems out on the course for sure. So I can empathize a little bit.
How much are you playing these days? I mean, I think you said once upon a time when you're the executive director of the UGA, you don't want to necessarily be like a scratch golfer, right? You want to stay in a certain area.
Yeah, I think if I suddenly became scratch, I think the people that I answer to would wonder how much golf I'm playing as opposed to working. So I like where my handicap's at right now. It's a 12, so it's respectable, but it's certainly not good. I wish I played more. It's less a product of working in golf and more just you'll get this 3 young kids at home, and so when I get free time, I'm usually back at home, and this long Knicks playoff run, got to be in front of the TV. So I actually haven't gotten to play that much this year, sadly. But as kids get a little older, I'll sneak out there a little bit more. I try to turn my handicap over, once a year, which requires 20 rounds a year. So that's kind of my gold standard is to get out there 20 times a year.
Kind of a cool piece of news. The Bank of Utah Championship, which for our listeners is the PGA event played at Black Desert, is going to award a sponsor exemption to the Utah State Amateur Champion. That's pretty cool.
Huge news. And up to this point, I haven't found another a state golf association that's been able to get a PGA Tour exemption. And so huge for the state am, huge for the UGA. We just launched this partnership with Bank of Utah just about a month or so ago, and they've been great partners. And this is a multi-year partnership, and we're really excited about it. They've been awesome to work with. And so, not only does our champion win, of course, the state amateur, the crown jewel of Utah, but they're also going to be exempt into the U.S. amateur, as well as the Bank of Utah championship at Black Desert. So a nice little package for our champion.
Have you played down there? Have you played at Black Desert?
Yeah, a couple times. I really love it. It's I find for my game, I mentioned I'm a 12 handicap, and so I'm certainly far from a stick. But yeah, I've noticed you got a little more room off the tee, a little more resort style in that sense. A little more room off the tee, and then the approach shot is challenging, and the greens are a lot of fun. I think sometimes in Utah, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we take it for granted a little bit. I mean, you've got this every time I'm there. You have this combination of green grass, red rock, black rock, blue sky, and I think we're kind of used to it in Utah, but it's just an amazing golf course. It's so scenic and pretty. Hopefully you've gotten a chance to get out there and play.
Yeah, I think I've played 4 times. It's amazing. Like every time I leave, I'm like, when can I get back here? And I don't know that I played super well any of the 4 times I've played, but I certainly have had a good time. But I've got one more thing before I set you loose, okay?
Okay, shoot.
So I have a friend who is a scratch golfer. He's very good, but he is a coward. He is a wimp. And so he signed up to play in a mid-am qualifier down in St. George, Green Springs. And he's like, I don't want to do it alone. You need to sign up. And I shouldn't have, but I did. Did not have a great day. Your boy carded a 10 and a 9 back-to-back. I had to re-tee on one hole 4 times. So it was a rough day for your guy over here. Can we not post these scores publicly? Okay, like it's a little bit embarrassing when I have a rough day and the entire world needs to know it, Easton.
Hey, I saw that you were playing. I thought it was courageous, and you should be playing. We all have bad days. You know, I certainly wasn't going to bring it up in this interview for sure, but we hope you get back out there, get back on the horse, and play. We've all been there where we've taken a couple 10s and 9s. I think it's quite courageous. I think you're right there, and you should give it another shot.
I appreciate it. What do you want our listeners to know about how they can get involved at the UGA?
We want everybody to get a handicap index. I think it's the most important piece to tracking your game, seeing the progress, seeing where you start today, where you're going to be in a year. You can kind of see that everybody's heard about, hey, do you keep a handicap card? And I think there's a misnomer and some miscommunication on it. Everybody thinks you got to be good to have a handicap index. You can have a handicap index up to a 54. And so a handicap index is for everybody. It's a great way to track your game. There's a lot of benefits that come along with it. Discounts on different things. We've got B's discounts, we've got RSL discounts, we've got member days. We just talked about Black Desert. Our members are going to get to go down and play Black Desert along with some of the other great golf courses in southern Utah. So go to UGA.org, get signed up for a membership. It's just $38, and you get quite a few benefits that come along with that. So we'd always accept anybody, call in, we'll get you squared away, but we want every golfer that enjoys the game to be a UGA member.
2 hours from tip, buddy. Go get those honeydews done. Go Knicks. We'll talk soon, okay? Thanks, Easton.
Go Knicks indeed. Thanks, Spence.
Easton Folster, the Utah Golf Association Executive Director. Always appreciate his time. Really cool news that the Bank of Utah Championship is going to award a sponsor exemption to the Utah State Amateur Champ. That's awesome. All right, we're going to do some football coming up next with Sam Bruckhouse. But before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at DraftKings. DraftKings Sports is live in all 50 states. Yes, that means you, Utah. The whole world is watching one tournament right now. Group stage chaos, knockout drama, stoppage time, heartbreak. The DraftKings Sports app is now live in Utah. So whether you're catching the early kickoff before work or the late match at the bar, you're in on every minute, every match, and every moment, all in one app. The world's biggest stage is in the palm of your hand. New DraftKings customers sign up with code ESPN 700, spend $5 to get $200 in total rewards. The crown is yours. Event trading offered by DraftKings Predictions, a CFTC registered introducing broker. Trading involves risk of loss. Market availability varies. Eligibility restrictions apply. $50 every 7 days via click-to-claim issued in non-withdrawable prediction dollars that expire in 1 year. It ends on June the 28th. Terms, dkng.co/predictions promo. All right, Sam Bruckhouse joins us coming up next on ESPN 700. All right, we're less than 2 hours away from tip-off tonight at Madison Square Garden, where the NBA Finals resumes. You can hear the NBA Finals on this radio station after we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. The New York Knicks will attempt to take a 3-1 lead over the San Antonio Spurs, where the Spurs will, of course, try to even it up at 2 games apiece. The Knicks are a 2.5-point favorite to win the game tonight. So stay tuned. We'll talk more basketball in the 5 o'clock hour, but talk a little football. How about that? Joins us a ton during the season. Sorry for bothering Sam Bruckhouse during the offseason, but he's good enough to join us on Wednesday. What's up, Sam? How are you, bud?
I'm doing good. Thank y'all so much for having me.
What does one Sam Bruckhouse do during the football offseason?
Right now, I'm focused on being an engineer. I'm a data scientist by trade, working on all of our artificial intelligence models. And I don't know if you're deep into it, but artificial intelligence is moving at a absolutely ridiculous pace. Talking about college football, in fact, friend of mine, Connor McQuiston, got hired to be or promoted to the head of AI at USC. So right now at Sumer Sports, we're going into the lab, we're building our AI tools, and we're building to be better for the season.
I saw that. Help me understand. And look, I feel like AI is kind of permeating throughout the entirety of society right now, and I'm trying to learn as much about it as I can. What's the practical application of AI as it pertains to college football?
So, look, I think at first glance, this is probably just a great title for Connor, and I'm really excited for him, and I'm really excited for USC football as someone who is dating someone who worked for Lincoln Riley and the previous administration at USC. But I think basically what the idea of these kind of AI-based roles is twofold. Number one, we want deeper analysis. That is nothing new. That's been going on since Steve Belichick wrote his scouting analysis. We want to use technology to do it is number two. And I think we are progressing past the point where you need a data scientist who can code and more into a point where you have someone who can understand data science, understand football, and understand kind of, using applications and using apps on your phone and where that needs to go and bringing that all together. Because, Spence, at least not to bore the listeners here, but coming from a coder, I've completely changed the way I work. And so I think it could realistically be a portion of the guys who now have the books on the sidelines deciding fourth down. That is generated by AI. At some point, they have the Surface tablets on the sidelines in the NFL. You may have access to an AI tool that connects to your data and to your analysis. I do think that is within the realm. Now, at Sumer Sports, we have a core philosophy that football is much better when analytics and the eye test are together. I don't think AI is ever going to take over football, but I do think it can speed up some of the processes that folks like the ones at USC have.
Very interesting. I wanted to get you on the show today to talk about a couple of different topics. But, Sam, as you know, we're out here in Big 12 country, and the massive Big 12 storyline is surrounding Brendan Sorsby. And for our listeners, Sam was a player once upon a time. So you'll have good perspective here. And we have tried to really be fair here to speak about every angle, to try to kind of understand exactly where the medical community is with treatment for gambling addiction and what it means when somebody finds themselves in a bad spot, the dynamic of really doing young people a real disservice by giving them access to these apps. And Urban Meyer talked about this recently. These young men suddenly have hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in the ability to download an app on their phone where instantly they can transfer whatever they want to start betting on sports. I mean, I tried to be fair to all of it, but certainly an unprecedented ruling with the injunction that, as of now, will allow Brendan Sorsby to play college football and be ready in time for the Big 12 opener against Houston. I just wondered, as a former player and somebody that makes a living in this space, your takeaways from this situation.
Yeah, I think there's probably three main takeaways. The first and the number one is these betting services are so big, so well funded, and so data rich that they will catch you if you do something wrong. I've had friends in the industry who have, just mistakenly placed a bet on a game and immediately were called by their industry employer within about 10 to 15 seconds. So it is a pretty quick catch. for these lists and for these teams when it comes down to what is going on. The second item is that we're just in kind of a new era when it comes to these court rulings. And I think this has less to do with sports betting and potentially has more to do with just like the governance in general, which is these schools have figured out that they can find judges to get the rulings that they want. And when you're working in a space like the NCAA, those judges are going to be very, very tightly tied in to those universities. And for better or worse, that may bias the courts. I believe in this injunction case prior to, there was a Texas Tech person who recused themselves. So it kind of shows kind of what has been moving forward in politics, that despite what side you're on, you can probably agree with it, that there's a lot going on that is new and strange in the U.S. political system. And namely, and I think like most strictly, this is popping up in sports with Donald Trump going to the Knicks game and on the same day, this injunction being arisen. And it just kind of shows us a sign of the changing political tides. I think this is more of a political case than necessarily even a college sports case, that these courts can basically make guys eligible. And this goes to before Brendan Sorsby. This goes to Diego Pavia with the transfer portal rules. This goes to guys like Darian Mensah with breaking his contract and moving to Miami. Like, this is across sports, college sports right now. And so it's just very interesting that the NCAA has basically no object to govern unless there is a kind of a sports czar at the governmental level and at the federal level, probably. Maybe that will be Nick Saban, who testified fairly recently. But it's like a massive problem. And that brings me to the third element. The reason this exists is because the NCAA refuses to treat players like employees. The reason that they can kick Chauncey Billups out of the league immediately and that they can get Terry Rozier out the paint when he gets caught gambling is because there's a collective bargaining agreement between the NBA Players Association and the NBA. And basically what they have agreed in that collective bargaining agreement is that both sides have a vested interest in ensuring that when players and betting folks, like betting companies, people that are betting, when they're watching a game, that there is integrity in that game. And it just seems like without a collective bargaining agreement, that will not be the case in the NCAA, whether that is politically or whether that is just kind of like with betting on the field more generally.
Sam, you are speaking my language, brother. I've been yelling that for 5-6 years. When NIL and transfer portal became a reality, essentially it's different language for free agency and the need for a salary cap. Obviously, you know, the schools now can pay up to $20.5 million or whatever it is, and then NIL is on top of that. I understand it. Let me ask you, I think it's the only course of action. I think it's the one thing that has to happen for the players to unionize and then collectively bargain with the powers that be, if that's the NCAA or whatever. Why aren't we there? What is stopping us from doing what I perceive to be the only solution to what is plaguing this sport?
So I think there's three main problems. The first is that the NCAA doesn't want to do it because the NCAA, or the colleges in specific, want to have one governance power over all their sports so that they don't have to hire a bunch more people. The reality is that probably college basketball, college basketball separately, women's and men's basketball, and football probably need to be separated from all the other sports. Potentially women's softball as well at this point. The reason why they don't is because it's just really difficult to govern. And you're in a scenario where there are presidents and boards of supervisors who are academics and care about academics governing these athletic departments. And so when you have the presidents making a decision to be in a conference and the conference deciding to be in the NCAA, you have multiple levels of governance that works fantastically for swimming or fantastically for water polo, but it just is no longer working for the big money sports such as football that are really, really earning revenue, and thus the players are entitled to a piece. So until the schools kind of come together and decide that we understand we're making a ton of money, and we understand that these are marketing and entertainment products, and that the players are entitled to some of that money. At the sport level, we're going to keep having these court problems, because the reality, and that brings me to my second point. You mentioned the salary cap. The reality here is that NIL money is available to anyone. Shohei Ohtani is making NIL money. The reason why the whole Kawhi Leonard case with the Clippers is taking so long to go through is because it's really hard to prove that company, which, may have been a shell company. I think the CEO just went to jail. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've followed with the reporting. It's really hard to prove that was a through payment and not an NIL payment, because these players' NIL is extremely valuable. So even if there is a salary cap, there's still going to be problems with NIL, and it's going to cause a lot of problems specifically unless it is legislated in the CBA, which brings me to my third point. It's just really, really hard to negotiate with, 90 guys on 153 teams. So thousands and thousands of college football players, all with radically different career paths. 99% of college athletes don't go on to be pro. And it's just really, really difficult to manage from the players' side to unionize as well. And then finally, it just seems like the government has no real taste for it. I mean, the SCORE Act, I believe it was called, was shut down kind of by both sides, frankly, for this exact reason. So I think basically when you have a loyalty that is not to a professional team, I'm going to watch Tulane whether they're 2-11 or whether they're 11-2, because I like going to see my buddies at Tulane. It has nothing to do with my geography. I'm a Knicks fan because I used to live in New York. I'm a Saints fan because I grew up in Louisiana. It has nothing to do really with even, having kids or loving sports. It has to do with where you went to school. And when you have something like that is not necessarily sensible, it really causes problems all the way down.
Since you're a Knick fan, I got to ask you, because as you know, I am as well. So is Porter. Do we get it done tonight? Are you as anxious as I am about tonight?
Look, I think these are two very, very evenly matched teams. I think it comes down to one thing. Victor Wembanyama, when he is able to stay on the floor and play defense throughout the second half, he is a game changer. And it comes down on the flip side to his ability or inability to make and take and make mid-range shots. So if the Knicks are able, again, to force him to take those mid-range shots, and they're able to probably get a little bit better of a whistle, which I expect them to get in Game 4, I think this is probably a Knicks game. But Victor Wembanyama is the X factor here. He's by far the best player. And I think switching him on to Josh Hart while also kind of changing his substitution pattern so that he's able to stay in for pretty much the entirety of the fourth quarter without losing gas, and finally trying to change his shot diet, which wasn't fantastic in Game 3, but looked a little bit better. I think if the coaching staff of the Spurs can continue to do that, it will look good. But I think the Knicks are probably the better team here. And frankly, you look at this roster and you think about 2 years ago, it's kind of crazy to say that. Jalen Brunson, former sixth man. Karl Anthony Towns, a guy who for years and years and years was talked about as the guy who just couldn't get it done. Josh Hart, who was a guy who was on a non-guaranteed contract with the Pelicans several years ago. Really the only kind of primo first-round star there is OG Anunoby. It's really kind of a entitlement to show how you can really build a team, I guess, through the power of friendship and maybe the Pope getting involved. I'm not sure, but I hope the Knicks win Game 4.
How about my football guy, Sam Bruckhouse, giving me a basketball breakdown? Well done, young man.
Hey, look, I when I first came into this industry, sure, I was a football player at Tulane, but I was working for a basketball agent. So I got my friends in the industry. In fact, shout out to Andrew Weatherman, one of the coaches of the Spurs, who's a friend of mine. He formerly worked for the Knicks last year. So I'm rooting for him personally, but rooting for the Knicks more generally.
There you go. All right, before I say you lose, a couple more things on the Sorsby stuff, since we are in Big 12 country. Mm-hmm. There's a narrative that's probably real that Texas Tech has separated themselves from everyone else in the Big 12. And if BYU was the second best team in the Big 12, Texas Tech smoked them twice. When Texas Tech was here in Salt Lake, Utah played them pretty tough, but that doesn't matter. They didn't win. How much of the Brendan Sorsby reaction from folks around the Big 12 is steeped in the fact that this kid's the starting quarterback for Texas Tech?
I think it's tough to say, and I think you have to kind of go back in the annals of history to try to figure out what it really means for this Texas Tech team. For one, I really liked how the young kid looks, particularly in the Utah game. So I actually don't know what the drop-off from Sorsby, who played well at Cincinnati last year, but kind of lost it down the stretch, probably more due to his surroundings than himself, what the delta is over him versus the young quarterback who's the backup. But here is like the core element here. That Texas Tech team last year, which was kind of put together on a dime, quite literally, maybe more put together on a Benjamin, I guess I should say, than a dime, had 4 NFL defensive linemen, or 3 highly chosen ones at least, and Romello Height, David Bailey, and Lee Hunter. The last time we saw something like that, particularly when you start going into the wide receivers that were drafted, Caleb Douglas and some of the other players who came out, the last time we saw that was the Florida State team with Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Johnny Wilson, etc. And that team ended up tanking for basically the next 2 or 3 years. I think it's a lot harder to put together teams like this, where you are getting, really, really young players and you're getting older players because you're paying for both of those. And then if those really young players don't pan out, then they're leaving. And they're really leaving before they can stay for 2 or 3 years anyway, because they can probably get a better payday if they don't play. And so I think it's really hard to build that. And I really do have some doubts. I think there's some variance to what this Texas Tech team could be, even if Brendan Sorsby plays.
Sam, where can people go get your work, bud?
Yeah, go check us out. Sumer Sports on YouTube. That's the best place to find us.
Hey, you're the man. I appreciate the time. Have a great week, and go Knicks, all right?
Go Knicks. Thank y'all so much.
Sam Bruckhouse, Sumer Sports, does a lot of NFL and college football for us during the college football season, but thought we would bring him on to get a little update on where he was at with the current landscape of the Big 12 and a couple of different things here with the Big 12 ADs. Apparently, the athletic directors in and around the Big 12 held a phone call. It sounded like it was just to kind of like air out their grievances, quite frankly. And, of course, no official word on what the Big 12 may or may not do here. I'm not sure there's anything they can do. The legal process is played out, and Brendan Sorsby looks like he's going to play college football for Texas Tech. We will catch a quick break. We are about, an hour and 37 minutes away from tip-off. Game 4 of the NBA Finals between the Spurs and the Knicks starts tonight at 6:30, and you can hear it right here on ESPN 700. Patrick Mahomes was forced to rework his contract today. Poor guy's going to make $500 million. $500 million to play quarterback in the NFL for young Patrick Mahomes.
I mean, listen, if you're the best at what you do, there's going to be a pretty crazy market for you. Still seems and sounds absurd, for sure, but that only becomes more true when the thing that you're the best at is literally playing quarterback at the NFL. That's just a crazy number.
Yep, the market dictates your value, and if you're able to get paid, good for you. All right, Porter, Game 4, Knicks Spurs, about a half hour-ish from right now, 6:30 Mountain Time, ABC, Madison Square Garden. Knicks a 2.5-point favorite to win the game tonight. I am disappointed. I think Tim McMahon put this well earlier. I don't know how many of these awful people, is how I'll put that, outside of Madison Square Garden, attacking Spurs fans are actual Knick fans, but a lot of them are wearing Knick jerseys. The videos going around on social media of bad behavior after Knick games outside Madison Square Garden has been very, very disappointing. I thought Karl Anthony Towns gave a really good response to this. Victor Wembanyama talked about it as well. I don't understand culturally why we feel like we can physically harm other humans as a result of them wearing a jersey that we don't like because we're playing their team. You're not on the team. It's a bad look for New York, bad look for Knick fans. It makes all Knick fans look really, really dumb. So hopefully none of that tonight. Trump is not in the building. I love Tim's line, too much orange and not enough blue earlier for Game 3. So hopefully fans can get in without waiting in security lines for 3 hours, and the weird vibe in the building for Game 3 is not present for Game 4. We've talked a little bit about some of the adjustments San Antonio made in Game 3, playing Jalen straight up with Stephon Castle, maybe bringing a double late, throwing 2 defenders at Cat to take away passing lanes. A lot of this will be make or miss. Knicks missed a lot of shots in Game 3. Hopefully the whistle is a little more fair. I'm nervous, man. I got to say, I don't think I've realized the childhood trauma PTSD that I need to process with this basketball team until there's all of this on the line. I don't feel good about tonight, but maybe they get it done.
Yeah, as someone who, when the Knicks are like not even good, puts way too much emotional stock into what they're doing and how they're performing, having the ante upped is not good. Like, I wear my Apple Watch all year, all the time, right?
Same.
You can visibly see that I'm like, I have anxiety this week over a basketball team. My heart rate's just sitting higher, and nothing else going on outside of the Knicks situation. So I'm with you. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I do think if I step back and just look at the teams on the floor, the Knicks are deeper. They don't have that one guy, though. And if you have the best player or the most impactful player in a series, you have a chance to win that series. So I think that's what it comes down to. We can simplify it all we want, but how the Knicks approach Victor and vice versa is going to dictate the ball game tonight. And again, as I said as we came in today, I think the winner of the game tonight probably wins the series. Not said and done. You can't stamp it. There's still more basketball to be played, but it does feel that way after how the first 3 games transpired.
It's only the 3rd time in NBA history that the NBA Finals has started with 3 games won by the road team. 0 times in NBA history has this series started with 4 teams, as far as 4 games being won by the road team. Never happened. San Antonio could make history tonight. If I held you to one name, one Knick who has to be better tonight than he was in Game 3 for them to win, who would you go with?
It's Karl Anthony Towns.
It's Cat, yeah. It could be Bridges. Bridges was horrible, but it's Cat.
Yeah. Bridges. The thing with Mikal Bridges is that regardless of how invisible he seems, he's always doing something defensively. He's always creating some sort of effect on the game. When Cat is out of it offensively, he seems to withdraw a lot. He seems not to be aggressive. We saw how good he was when he was pushing the issue in Game 1. That's the guy you need to see. Not only be aggressive so you can get the ball in the bucket, but be aggressive because you need to beat up that 7'5" thin frame that's sitting across from you. You need Karl Anthony Towns to push Victor Wembanyama away from the rim, and you need him offensively to take a little pressure off Jalen Brunson. And I think if he is better, Knicks have a much, much better opportunity.
Going to be a big audience. Game 3 was the most watched NBA Finals game since 1998 when the Chicago Bulls played a team known as the Utah Jazz. So we'll see. 6:30 tonight, right around the corner. It is time for tip-off between the Spurs and the Knicks. It is Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Porter, before we say goodnight, what are we doing on a Thursday edition of the show?
Thursday edition of The Drive. Of course, we will react to NBA Finals action. Craig Bolerjack stops by to talk some hoop, maybe some college football as well. Ryan McGee of ESPN joins the program. Formerly of ESPN, one Spencer Hall joins the program. Two, I would say, very good guests to discuss the offseason chaos that is. And your buddy Ed Peterson is going to stop by the show as well, and a little different angle on that particular issue.
There you go. Yeah, Ed is an addiction specialist. He actually has degrees in the medical field. So instead of trying to blab our way through what addiction means and where gambling is on the scope of it, we'll let a professional kind of teach us a little bit. So join us for a Thursday edition of the show. We will say goodnight. Special thank you today to Neil Smith, Tim McMahon, Easton Folster, and Sam Bruckhouse. If you missed any of the show today, good news for you. It's up on the website, ESPN700sports.com. Download the mobile app and take us on the go. The ESPN 700 app is available in the Apple Store and the Google Play Store for free. And then for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, got a couple of podcasts for you. One is called Reality Check with Spence Checketts. That is my new podcast with KUTV. Our guy Smitty is my guest this week. The other one is called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and both of them are available wherever you get your shows. So please subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and give us all the stars. It helps. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a great Wednesday evening. Coming up on the other side, pregame coverage, then tip-off Game 4 of the NBA Finals between the Knicks and the Spurs. And you'll catch all the action right here on your home of the Utes, ESPN 700.